Well, the Tigers have a rainout on Tuesday, so they're going to play a doubleheader today on Wednesday as you're listening to this. So, this episode, we're going to preview the series for real, take a little more time and talk about the Mets, and we're going to do a surprise mailbag. Kind of tweeted something out there, just ask for any questions because the game got rained out and got some. So, we're going to go through those all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All righty. Well, as I said in the cold there, we have a surprise mailbag show. Surprise, it's a mailbag. The game got rained out, and when games get rained out at the last second, I don't know what to talk about. And usually I would just do an episode similar to what we did yesterday, but because I did a month recap where the team stands right now, talking about a lot of in general conversations on yesterday's show. Couldn't do that 2 episodes in a row, really. So I figured I'd turn to the people. Our Twitter account at Locked On Tigers, pretty straightforward there. And then my personal Twitter at Bentley Scotty. Both kind of just put out there, if anyone has any questions, we're doing a mailbag show last second and got enough questions in that short amount of time to get a show for you today. Pretty good questions as well. You guys always have fantastic questions. Honestly, I'll probably try to do some more mailbags. Honestly, throughout the year, just because, you guys always have fantastic questions, and it really allows me to dive into things that I know that you want to talk about, and not just me kind of assuming or guessing sometimes. So, we're going to go through those. And at the end of the show, we will preview the Mets series, like for real, like full. I'm going to give my full thoughts on the New York Mets. And that's going to be the show. Okay. So let's start with the mailbag. Where do we want to start here? That's a great question. Here's a fun one to start from at Griffin Beers, who's interacts with my stuff fairly often, and I greatly appreciate. Over or under 3.5 Miguel Cabrera home runs this year? That is a question. That's like I really think if you had asked me to make a line for Miguel Cabrera over under home runs, I probably would have put it. I might have put it at like 4.5, just so that you can kind of get people with the over under 5 type of like vibe. But I 3.5's right there. I'm gonna go with the over, and the only reason why is because I think he'll have like a couple most of the season. And then I think you might see something similar to, not nearly as dramatic or as good as the Albert Pujols thing, where he had like a 900 whatever OPS in the second half of the season. Not anything crazy like that, but I think that he might have like, he has 3 homers in his last 3 weeks of the season or something like that. You know what I mean? Feel like he might just completely sell out for power there to end the season and not even care about the average. Not that the average is even good right now, but I thought that was kind of a sadly fun question. I know it's that low, and that's really not enjoyable, but I did think that was kind of a fun question. Here is, well, there's one from my co-host over at Locked On Red Wings who says, "Will the Tigers land Bedard in the draft lottery?" Super funny, Brian. Hilarious as always. No, I don't think they will. Okay, so we have a couple that are kind of in the same conversation here. So, one, I'm going to start with this one from Nick Morgenstern. If I butcher anyone's name, just know I'm bad with names in general. No disrespect intended at all. Nick actually interacts with quite a bit of the Locked On Tiger stuff as well. So, what is the likelihood that both Lang and Foley are on the team in August? Okay, this is a great question. So and this is kind of ties into there's a question from at YOLO Sports that is just in general who's going to get traded this year. We'll get into that one after I answer this one. But when focusing on Lang and Foley specifically, it really is a intriguing conversation that I'm not sure I know the answer to on May 2nd when I'm recording this. It's because they do both have team control, like a lot of team control left. They both have 3-4 years of control left, 4 or 5 even. 4, give or take a year of control left. So when you're evaluating what players are going to get you the most value at the deadline, I mean, I've said it a million times already this season. Every single team, 29 other teams in baseball, would do unthinkable things to get an automatic ground ball coming out of their bullpen, which is what the Tigers have in Jason Foley. It's an unbelievably valuable asset, and his ERA is not going to stay at 1.5 the entire season. And I've said this before too. Like, I'm sure he'll get blow a game, whether it's a hold or a save, with some BABIP because he is a pitch to contact pitcher that doesn't get a lot of swings and misses. I'm sure that's inevitable. I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure people are going to be totally rational about it when it happens. But I promise you, every other team in baseball would love a dude with like an 80% ground ball rate, which is what Foley's is right now. So that, and then Alex Lang is so nasty. He's going to be toward the top of the league in whiff rate for probably the next 3 to 6 years. Like he's just has unbelievably filthy stuff. So opposite ends of the spectrum there a little bit in style, but both very effective this year with sub 1.5 ERAs. I think my gut tells me right now that they're both still on the team in August. And the only reason why is because it's so much control, right? Like if these dudes had 2 years of control left, right? If it was like 2 or 3 years of control left, we'd probably start having a dialogue where we're like, okay, maybe this is time to start having this conversation because so often, I mean, if you go back and look at the trade deadline episode from last year when I lost my mind on air, like it was because Al Avila was so uncreative. That was the word I kept using. He's so uncreative. Like it's the only trades he makes are players that are rentals or are on expiring deals. There's no trading anybody with multiple years of service time to try to get more value. And so I do think that it's a conversation. And would it absolutely stun me if we get to August and one of those dudes is on the block and traded? No, definitely not. Because that would be, I mean, you could argue maximizing value. But, oh, man, I go back and forth a lot. It's really difficult for me. I really go back and forth a lot. Because when we traded Soto, one of the conversations was like how important really is a good bullpen when you're a borderline 100 loss team. It's not very valuable. But Alex Lang's a free agent in 2028. He's not even arbitration eligible until 2025. He only has 1 year of service time, Alex Lang. So that's 5 years of Alex Lang. 4.5, right? Years of Alex Lang that you'd be giving up if you traded him at the deadline. And Jason Foley, same exact amount of service time. So for both of these dudes, you're trading 4.5 years of service time. You better get a haul. You better get a haul. But my gut tells me no. I think that they probably keep them. They realize that they have 4 years after this one still of them in their bullpen. And I think that then next year is when that conversation really ticks up. Like if the offense gets no better next year, the players on the team currently get no better next year, then, well, I mean, not to like really sound the alarm here, but if next year is just as bad with the same personnel, I think we're legitimately having a conversation about just like I don't know, maybe rebuild 2.0. But we're going to cross that bridge when we get to it. That's not a problem right now. It's May 2nd, 2023. It's not July of 2024. So we're going to kick the can down the road with that conversation. But I think this year, I'm going to say they hold on to him, but I'm not, as you can tell, uber confident about that. But that's my gut feeling right now is just too much service time on the table for them to really let go. Okay, let's get into the rest of your fantastic questions. But first, I got to tell y'all about our friends over at Rocket Money. We've all heard the phrase try it free for 30 days, just enough time to try it and then completely forget about it. In fact, over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about. That's a Jason Foley ground ball guarantee. That is an insanely high amount of people. You could be wasting money and not even realizing it. Rocket Money helps you find those forgotten subscriptions so you can stop paying for the ones you don't use. I just did this like a couple of weeks ago, and I was so embarrassed at how many subscriptions I was actually still paying for. And most Americans also think that they spend about $80 a month on all of their subscriptions, when it turns out it's closer to 200. So if you don't know exactly how much you're spending every month, you need Rocket Money. Rising prices stressing you out. If you're looking for a way to cut costs, Rocket Money is the way to do that. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions and monitors your spending and helps you lower your bills all in one place. So stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the best way and the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnMLB. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnMLB today. All right, everybody. Welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Mailbag show today. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Appreciate the everydayers that do tune in every day. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, weather permitting. It looks like tomorrow is going to be a nicer day. Today, as you're listening to this, Wednesday. Recapping 2 games against the New York Mets. One of those will be pitched by Max Scherzer. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. So, talking about trade possibilities, we talked about the Alex Lange and Jason Foley possibility, which is a real possibility. That is a very I don't think it's likely. I would still venture on the side of no today, but a lot can change in a couple of months, and we'll see where the team's at when we get closer to the deadline. But right now, I'm going to say no, just because too much service time's left on the table there. And then YOLO Sports asks, who on the current team has a high likelihood of being traded before the deadline? 1-1, the bona fide answer, the most likely to get traded comfortably is Eduardo Rodriguez. That should be everyone's 1-1 for most likely. With the opt-out this offseason and the AAV that he'd be getting after the opt-out, probably lower than his value, certainly lower than what he's been pitching like lately. I think it's pretty darn likely that not only is he going to opt out, but that he's going to get traded before the deadline. So that's like the biggest one. When looking at the rest of the roster, people are always going to try to find a way for Javi Baez to get traded. It's not going to happen. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. I do think that we should keep an eye on the Matt Boyd and Michael Lorenzens of the world, just because they are expiring just like 1-year rental players. So if they were to pitch really, really well leading up to the break, it would be very easy to kind of point to them as candidates. But that far from guarantees with those. If there's no market for them, then there's no market for them. Simple as that. But Boyd, especially as a lefty that can get strikeouts, I would imagine if his numbers are relatively decent, that there's going to be somewhat of a market for him at the deadline. But a lot of season left there as well. Outside of those two, I think it's pretty slim. Like certainly no one offensively. I can't imagine anyone looking to the Detroit Tigers for help with their offensive woes. Jonathan Scope's the only one, and that would be if he like magically turned it around and started raking from the next couple of months. Like that, currently he's more likely to get DFA'd than he is traded. And then, yeah, like Javi's not going to happen despite opt out. Like he's probably going to opt into it. If he opts into it, he gets a raise actually, because that's the way that our previous GM constructed that contract, which is great. Shout out to him. I mean, really, like seriously, there's no one else on the offensive side of the ball at all. And then bullpen is really where you go outside of that. Like Erod's gonna get moved. I'm fairly confident in that. Boyd and Lorenzen we talked about. Wentz is going nowhere. There's no market for Spencer Turnbull at the present moment. Then we already talked about Lange and Foley. Those would, if you're gonna trade relievers, those would be the two to trade. Outside of that, I think the only one left is really Jose Cisnero. That one wouldn't surprise me at all. And that would also require him to perform. Like if he's giving up 3-run homers a bunch, as he did in the first couple of weeks of the season there, for the next couple of months, then he's going to go nowhere and he'll finish the season with the team. But Jose Cisnero is 34 years old and on an expiring deal. Like he has 5 years of service. So I think that he, if the velocity is decent and the numbers are decent, he could be like a buy low. We won't get too much for him. But he could be kind of a buy low reliever ad for a team trying to make a playoff push there. So that's really it. Those are really the ones that jump out to me. And that's such a fluid, ever evolving conversation. We'll kind of see where that takes us. But that's kind of my thoughts on it, where we stand right now. Anthony on Twitter asks, why does this season already feel like a failure, even though it lines up pretty directly with preseason expectations? Well, I think it's because the offense is awful. Like, if I'm just going to be blunt, I think it's because the offense is abysmal. Like, if we had the same record, but had the 20th ranked offense even, right? And the pitching was then a little worse, I think we'd be looking around going, hey, look at the offense is way better than last year. But we had one of the worst offenses literally in the history of the modern era of baseball last season, and have turned it around, and 1 month into the season still have the worst offense in the game of baseball. I think that's why. Genuinely, and like obviously just the nebs and flow of the season. You get a tough loss, you're going to feel down on yourself, and you got to kind of have the try, at least I'm terrible at it, but try to have the bigger picture of this is 1 of 162, and that's very difficult, not only in sports and baseball, but just like today's society and world in general. That's very hard to do. So I think that part of it is just like you're living in it. You're not thinking ahead, and it's not in hindsight either. But I think the biggest thing is just the offensive performance. Truly, like if this offense was better, I really do think that maybe some people would ease up. Or if there was anyone on the offense, maybe there was a single player on this offense that you were looking at and you were like, oh, geez, like, look at Riley Green as an 850 OPS, Spencer Torkelson as a, what, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's probably where a lot of that feeling comes from. It just feels like the same. Like the pitching is good enough. The offense is terrible. This is a repeat of last season, even though the record is better than it was at this time last season, believe it or not. Let's see here. What else do we have? Well, we have, what do you think the Tigers' record will be after May? And do you think Jonathan Scope will be DFA'd before June? The Jonathan Scope conversation is pretty easy. I've been on record very publicly on this show as saying that if Jonathan Scope's OPS, what is it right now? 555, I think. I mean, if it's that after May, how many days are in May? 31. If it's that after May 31st, I don't think he's playing too much into June. Yeah, he has a 261 slug. That, like, just completely not the hitter he was. Hasn't been for over a year. And with the expiring deal on top of that, you're not losing too much money. DFA him, and somebody will take a chance on him. I'm sure not on a waiver, because then you have to pay the contract. But after he clears waivers and we just outright him or cut him, I'm sure he'll get picked up by someone as a kind of a redemption project. But yeah, I don't think. Again, if he turns it around, he'll be here. But I don't think with these current numbers that he's going to be on the team like deep into June, or certainly not July. As far as what I think the team's record will be, I think Like I guess the bar is at around 10 wins. Like the one thing they have going for them is the last like three or four series of this month are awful baseball teams. It's the Nationals, it's the Royals, it's the White Sox. Like it's really really bad teams. And like I'm not saying the Tigers aren't bad. Like the Tigers are certainly not world beaters, but if you're putting it on the scale of winnable ball games, you finally have some at the end of this month, which is a redeeming thing. That's what 9 games I just listed off at least that are much more winnable than any game you've played really up to this point this entire season. But if the offense doesn't turn it around, it's not going to matter. Like it won't. That is the underlying and overlying, just the main theme of so far where we're at. This is all going to come down to, can the offense pick it up a little bit? Can anyone step up? And like Jake Rogers, again, over league average hitter, very appreciative of that at least. But like when you're looking at OPS plus, okay, this is just a scale. It's telling you who has an above league average OPS and who has a below league average OPS. The only people on the team with OPS pluses over 100. Jake Rogers, Matt Vierling at 109, barely above league average. Kerry Carpenter fell down to 107, so 7% better than league average. And then Zach McKinstry, who has a 118 OPS plus. Jake Rogers is 122. And you don't have a single player with an OPS over 800. And we talked about the slug on yesterday's show, just non-existent, no power whatsoever. So I sound like a broken record. I don't mean to give the same answer for every question, but like nothing is going to change if this team can't hit the ball a little bit at some point. And I'm hoping that at the end of May, when you play some worse teams and some worse pitching, you have the opportunity to do that. I think 10 wins should probably be the benchmark, right? You won 10 games in April with a harder schedule. I think that should probably be the starting point. Nothing that says this team can't have a nice little 11, 12, dare I say 13 win month. But that's all in theory. So when they go out there and win 7 this month, nobody has the right to give me any heat for it. All right. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. Wilmer Flores struggling in Double-A. Anything specific? I really, a lot of it is just command. Like the heater was such a valuable pitch for him going up through the system, and now he's at a point where Matt Manning went through a similar thing. And I don't want to like jump scare people and directly compare him to Matt Manning because he's a much different pitcher than Manning was, but. Kind of went through just a similar thing where like, oh, like you can't just blow fastballs past everybody and you have to have a little bit better command there. And I think that's something that he is going through a little bit right now at the minor league level. And he has like decent secondary stuff. It's just a matter of commanding it better and being able to utilize it in high leverage situations. YOLO Sports also asks who I want to see the Tigers take with the 3rd pick in the upcoming draft. Still a lot of college ball to be played there. We will have a ton of draft coverage when we get to that point. Still a lot of college and high school ball left to play. The one that intrigues me the most, not necessarily the one that, again, I'm not going to like say this is who we must take or else it's a failure on May 3rd, but Max Clark is really intriguing. He might be the best high school bat in the draft. He is the best high school bat in the draft. That's not a maybe. That's an objective truth. So at least right now. So that one's kind of intriguing just because you get a younger guy in here that supposedly can rake. But we'll have a lot more draft coverage with a lot of really smart people coming on and talking about some prospects as well. I think that's pretty much everything. If I didn't get to yours, it was either I think I saw all of them. You might have just submitted your question after I recorded this episode because it was on such short notice. But I appreciate everyone for reaching out and giving me some stuff to talk about on a rainout. So thank you, as always. Appreciate you all like crazy, as always. Let's get into this Mets series. We will do that right after I tell y'all about our friends over at So Rare. We've been talking about So Rare a lot lately. It's a revolutionary new fantasy baseball game and marketplace that transforms its fans into owners with officially licensed trading cards, digital cards featuring players from across all 30 teams. It's unlike any other fantasy platform because you, as a manager, you are truly an owner. You own your players and own your cards. They've got endorsements and partnerships with Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez as brand ambassadors, which is super cool. Yeah, they play 2 games a week, just kind of similar ish to fantasy baseball. You have your weekday games and your weekend slate. And yeah, prizes, you get prizes for winning. You can work your way up the ranks, and they vary depending on the competition you face. It's all really cool. So head to sorare.com/locked on. That's SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/locked on to start playing today. All right, everybody. Welcome back here. Segment 3, third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Just going to talk about this Mets series really quick, and then I'll send you on your way. Again, thank you so much for the questions, giving me a show here. I appreciate you all. So, talking about the Mets and what to expect, this is a better baseball team than you. No one's going to argue that. They objectively have a much better roster than the Tigers could even dream of having in the year 2023. There are it hasn't been the greatest season for the Mets so far. They're 16-13 going into this series. Again, better than you by quite a lot of games, but for the Mets standard, considering they spent more money than like anyone has ever spent in the history of baseball, like comfortably, like almost lapping the field in salary this year, you would think that they would maybe be toward the top. Now, very long season. We're only 1 month in. New York weather, yada, yada, whatever you want to say. I completely agree. We got a lot of baseball left. And with the nebs and flow of the season are certainly coming. And I'm sure the Mets will go on a heater at some point. It might even start this week. But so far, there are some holes that are poked in this lineup. They have top end hitting. Like Pete Alonso is one of the best home run hitters in baseball. Jeff McNeil, NL batting title last year, right? Is certainly going to be in that conversation again. It looks like this year over 300 batting average and some really good OBP numbers. He has more walks than strikeouts this season. Fantastic year so far from Jeff McNeil. And then like Brandon Nimmo has shown that he's been worth the money so far, hitting the cover off the ball. He's been really good. But like Francisco Lindor gives you a lot of value on defense. That's like the great thing about Lindor is that even if he's not tearing the cover off the ball at the plate, he's still so valuable to any baseball team he's on. And it's not like he's been bad. He has a 755 OPS. Like it's not like he's been horrific, but a 215 average, like could certainly have some more hits in there, just getting a lot of on base a lot via the walk and whatnot. So like that's, it could be a little bit better there, but they do have Eduardo Escobar, 606 OPS. Mark Canha hasn't gotten off to a great start this year, even though that's the dog. A 674 OPS for him. Starling Marte, a 615 OPS. Like they do, and then catcher, they have gotten zero production from the catcher position. Like genuinely zero. I know Nito has a like just awful numbers so far. He's only played in like 15 or 20 games. And then the former number one prospect in all of baseball, Francisco Alvarez, also has not gone off to a very good start, 569 OPS. So they're in this weird spot where they are getting like production from most of their top end guys, but they do have currently like, what is that, dang near half the lineup? Whoever plays catcher, 2 of the 3 outfield spots, and whoever's been at third base for the majority of the season has really given you nothing to speak of at the offensive side of the ball. DH, they've gotten really good value from Vogelbach, and they kind of do a somewhat platoon situation based on righty lefty. Brett Beatty has gotten off to an incredible start so far, 12 games into his season. So they've gotten some lightning in a bottle, but there is some stretches, some long stretches of that lineup with players that are consistently not productive after not productive after not productive. And again, the Tigers are no different. If you could argue the Tigers are 1-9 like that right now. Like I'm not saying that this is like an advantage, but for a team that spent as much money as they did, that's kind of where I'm at with the Mets right now. It's like they really need a lot of players to step up if they want to live up to those expectations that were bestowed on them, fairly or not, going into the season. And on the pitching side of things, like you're just the unluckiest team in baseball, man. The Tigers. You have to face Scherzer. You have to, in his first game back from suspension. You have to face Verlander in his first start of the season. And then you're getting Tyler, I think, in game one, who's been fine this year as well. So just more of a pitch to contact. I think that's the game that you probably can circle and be like, hey, if we want to steal one, please make it game one. I think that's probably your best case scenario, considering 2 of the 3 pitchers are first ballot Hall of Famers. But it's just so unlucky. Like, of course. As far as their bullpen goes, they've gotten very, very good production out of David Robertson this year. He has been absolutely phenomenal. Really has taken over the closer role. Infamously, kind of had a pretty big injury. I don't know if you heard about it in the World Baseball Classic. The Mets did with their new highest paid closer ever. And then, outside of that, I mean, Adam Ottavino's having a nice season so far. He's had a kind of a roller coaster career. Has had some good moments for the Red Sox, some not so good moments for the Red Sox. Drew Smith's been okay. John Curtis has been there's an ability to hit for an average offense. The Tigers just have very far from an average offense, so we'll see how they do. But yeah, you're getting 2 first ballot Hall of Fame pitchers, and you're getting a lineup that has one of the best contact hitters in baseball, one of the best power hitters in baseball, and just one of the highest paid players in baseball. So optically, it's an uphill battle. But again, I do think that there's holes that are pokeable, we'll call it, in this Mets team. But I fully expect the Mets to. I don't know if I have them winning the division at this point. I don't know about that. That was my thing going into the year with them. And I think we talked about it a little bit on air. We were kind of doing our preseason predictions. But like this, I expect Starling Marte to be better. I expect Mark Canha to be better. Like not those guys that have gotten off to a slow start, but there is like a bottom half of the lineup you kind of look at and you're like, I don't know if this is a highest payroll in the history of baseball lineup, despite the objective top end talent that is there. So we'll see what happens. But certainly the Tigers are like I said, uphill battle. Absolutely. But let's play 2, shall we? Let's play 2 and then wrap up the series with a Justin Verlander starting Comerica Park. Eh? Why not? Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every single day. Let me do one last check live to see if we got any more questions. Nope, that'll do it. Okay, so yeah, if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. You probably submitted it afterwards. If I just didn't see it, that's completely my fault, and I did not mean any ill will. We'll be back tomorrow, recapping 2, same time, same place. You know the drill. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you all then, baby. Go Tigers.